Okay, shalom, shalom, shalom. And so I am Rabbi James Byers. Thank you, one and all, for coming on and joining us. And we appreciate you. If you would like to join us in our live services, just go to our website, which is melohagoyim.org. And that is melohagoyim.org. That is our website. You can reach us there. And from the website, you can then choose to follow us on on the website. But if you would like to make a donation, you can also hit the donation button on the website. And so we're gonna get started right after this intro.
All right, it's a very simple song. The name of the song is Yahweh. We're going to lift the name of Yahweh all over this place. And we need you to just get out of your chairs, get on your feet, and scream the name of Yahweh. Hallelujah. Come on, y'all. Come on. Clap. 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 Real simple. It goes like this. Yahweh.
All right. Once again, shalom to everyone. And I'm going to go ahead and type out shalom to all. As our viewers come on, they will see. And there we go. Shalom to all. All right. So let's go ahead and get ready to jump in. Let's open up with prayer. Yahweh, Heavenly Father, we praise you. We honor you. We thank you, Father, for your goodness and your mercy, your love, which endures forever, your loving commitment. Thank you, Father. As this word goes out this evening, may it be that we are both hearers and doers of your word, and we shall praise your name forevermore. In the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, Yahweh, our Creator, hallelujah. All right, so let's go ahead and get our screen up, and I'm thinking that you should be able to now see it. There we go. And so tonight our teaching, or this evening, will be on watch. And this is actually part 3, Yahweh's army. And so going back to teachings that I've done previously. And so here is part 3 of what I've been looking at in watch. And just what is watch? Watch is from the book of Matthew, where Yeshua is speaking, and he has already been crucified. This is chapter 25, and he says, speaking the 10 maidens, 5 are foolish and 5 are wise. And the bridegroom came out, and 5 wise were ready to go, and the 5 wise went on in, and the door was shut. And so when the foolish bride got back, what did Yeshua say to them? He said to them, watch, for you do not know the time nor the season. And so there's a bit more to that, but we're going to leave it right there. And so if that's the viewpoint of his coming, then are we watching, and what are we watching for? And so this is what I'm going into. And so now we're going to look at Yahweh's army. Yahweh's army. So let's get up and running. All right, I think you should be able to see that. All right, now, shalom to Maisha. Shalom. All right, so let's go back to Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 15, verses 1 and 2. Let's look at the promise and the fulfillment. After these events, the word of Yahweh came to Abram in a vision, saying, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward is exceedingly great." And Abram said, "Master, Yahweh, what would you give me, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus?" Still in chapter 15, verses 13 and 14. And he said to Abram, "Now, or know for certain that your seed are to be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. But the nation whom they serve, I am going to judge, and afterward let them come out with great possession." All right, so right here we are looking at some telltale signs that Yahweh is relating to us, going back to Abraham. And he spoke to him also back in chapter 12 and told Abraham that he would have multiplicity of seed, and his seed from that point, not in history at that point, but he would bless Abraham with many seed, as the stars of the sky and sand of the sea, and also that they would inherit the promised land. And so we know the beginning of this is that they came out of Mizraim, or Egypt, and after they came out of Egypt, they settled in the promised land. And so right here, was this actually fulfilled yet? And so if it was actually fulfilled, as to what part was really fulfilled? Or is it yet still a promise to be fulfilled? And so this is what we want to begin to look at. Let's continue to go. All right, so let's look at the sign of Damascus. Isaiah chapter 17, verses 1 and 3. The message concerning Damascus: "See, Damascus ceased to be a city, and shall become a heap of ruins, and the stronghold shall cease from Ephraim, and the rain from Damascus, and the remnant of Aram be as the esteem of the sons of Israel, declares Yahweh of hosts." Okay, so let's look at that first. Let's look at, if Damascus is a sign, at this present time, Damascus has already fallen since 2011. And since 2011, Damascus were under two types of war, as we would say it in the modern era, and that is civil war and international war. So with these two types of wars taking place in the land of Damascus, can we say that this is a sign of the time? And being a sign of the time, what parts would we apply to this timeline? Well, let's look at it again. Damascus ceased to be a city. Okay, check. That has happened. And shall become a heap of ruin, and a stronghold shall cease from Ephraim. Now, and the rain from Damascus, and the remnant of Aram be as the esteem of the sons of Israel. Now, who is speaking? Yahweh. This is a declaration. And so now we can say during this modern era, we can see the fall of Damascus. You have the United States on one end and Russia on the other end, and this is called a proxy war. You have two international countries, dominant countries, that are not directly fighting, but indirectly using different warring factions, whether it's the Kurds, who are of Damascus, but also you have the president of that nation, along with Russia, who have stood in the way of the advancement of the Kurds. And so we have this sign that is now telling us the time is near. Let's look at Isaiah chapter 17, verse 7. In that day, man shall look to his maker, and his eyes turn to the set apart one of Israel. And so what does that actually mean? So if we're talking about signs and wonders, then all of the world is trying to figure out when will the Messiah return to us. And he said that he would return. If I go away, I will return to you to receive you unto myself. And so right here, it tells us that this sign also carries the weight of the wonder, the sign and wonder. When you see that, it says, in that day, man shall look to his maker. And so right here is a very powerful statement. It is a prophecy that is to be fulfilled. And so as we go throughout these slides, I'm going to prove what does it look like. What does it look like? So let's go back to 2018. Here is an image that I cut and paste, of course, took off the net. The unseen casualties of the Syrian civil war, February 15th, 2018. And this is the Stratford Contributor, and this is the newspaper, of course, online article that we're looking at. And so looking at this image, pretty much what Isaiah spoke about Damascus becoming a heap has pretty much taken place. And this is the site of Syria. The capital of Syria is Damascus. And so why is that important? Let's go back to Abraham. And Abraham's promise was to have multiple seed. And so his question to Yahweh was, the one that is the head of my house is Eleazar, who is from Damascus. Okay, so that's one. Let's go further in. Let's go to the time of Yeshua, and actually the time of Shaul or Paul, the apostle. And so we know that he had an event that Damascus was a big part of his conversion, as people would call it, but him going from an enemy of the Messianic Hebrews to becoming a Messianic Hebrew himself. And so this was the turning point when Yeshua spoke to Shaul, and Yeshua had already been crucified. He had risen to go back to the right hand of the Father. And Shaul obtained permission from the Sanhedrin Sanhedral Council to seek anyone who was speaking concerning Yeshua, and he would go out, seek them out, and imprison them, kill them off. And so this was his task and job at that time. But then he met Yeshua, where he heard his voice, but he became blind and couldn't see. And so from that point of time, you can trace back a very strong character in Shaul that brought him into the Messianic belief. So we're going to leave it right there, but we're going to continue with Revelation chapter 15, verses 1 through 3. So how do we know the end of Misraim, or the death of the firstborn? All right, so let's look at this. Verses 1 through 3, Revelation chapter 15. And I saw another sign in the heaven, great and marvelous, 7 messengers, having the 7 last plagues, for the wrath of Elohim was ended in them. And I saw like a sea of glass mixed with fire, and those overcoming the beast and his image and his mark and the number of his name, standing on the sea of glass, holding harps of Elohim. And they sang the song of Moshe, the servant of Elohim, and the song of the Lamb, saying, great and marvelous are your works, Yahweh El Shaddai. Righteous and true are your ways, O sovereign of the set apart ones. So let's look at this and really begin to decipher, what does this really mean? Now we know that we've already went to, and in that day, Isaiah 17, and in that day, man shall see his maker, right? And so right here, it talks about Yeshua, and they shall sing the song of Moshe. So Yahweh has really given us information that if we choose to study his Torah, he's given us a timeline. And in this timeline, you can know, and I know we looked at, as we open up, no man knows the day nor the hour. And even that in itself is a clue as to the signs that Yahweh has given us. And in the signs that Yahweh has given us, he has given us a timeline to understand his coming. And so don't forget, what he said to the Pharisees and scribes. He said that you're a bunch of hypocrites because the son of Adam is coming and you don't know. He said you can tell the signs, of weather, inclement weather or good weather, but you don't know the signs of the coming of the son of Adam. And he is here. He is here now, actually. At that time. And so they were very angry at him for saying such a thing, but he called them hypocrites. And so, in other words, in Revelation, it's a book of the witness of Messiah. The Messiah is, his life was about prophecy and fulfilling. So right here, he says in chapter 15, the 7 messengers having the 7 last plagues. So when will the plagues end? When the 7 last plagues have happened, they will end. In other words, people are trying to figure out, so what's going on now? We have coronavirus. And so what does that have to do with end time prophecy? Because some people say, okay, this is, conspiracy theorists. Some people say, this is man-made. Some people say, Yahweh. But let's look at it like this. 1903, the Wright brothers successfully had the first flight. They, from there, began to build airplanes, of which today, 2020, we have jets, helicopters, spacecrafts, hot air balloons, all types of aircrafts. Now, was that man-made or Yahweh-made? Let me explain it like this. Everything Yahweh created was back in the garden, because on the 7th day, he didn't create anything else. He finished. On the 7th day, he rested, and he gave that as a gift to man. But in order to fully embrace that, you have to stop work on the Sabbath day and embrace the time of rest. I mean, can you imagine how he has given this as a gift to man? And as a gift to man, we get to take that time to love on our families. And then once a year, we have holy days that come in throughout the year, 7 months through the year, ending with Sukkot. So from Passover through Sukkot, you have the annual holy days that we get to also spend with our families. And so in that, you will find one of them speaks of a day that no man knows the day nor the hour, which is the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah. And so while I want to continue moving through, there's a lot of symbolism there, and this is what we're looking at. We're looking at the Song of Moshe. So what is it about the Song of Moshe? The Song of Moshe is, according to Deuteronomy chapter 31, Deuteronomy chapter 31, the Song of Moshe, you can look at verse 17, you can kind of get all the way there, and you will have from verse 10 all the way through 17. You will read about the Song of Moshe, where Yahweh, before they were to go into the promised land, he said, today you are 120 years old, and basically you're not to go into the promised land, but you can go up to the top of the mountain and see over into the good land. And so I want you to teach them this song and teach them, put it in their mouths so that it remains as a witness against them. So this is 2 different generations. So we're talking about the 40th year going into Mizraim or Egypt, coming out of Egypt, going into the promised land, and they have this song that have been taught to them, and they sung this song, and Moshe died and was gathered to the fathers. And so this song is now spoken of in Revelation. You can go and check it out, chapter 14, verse 1, and the 144,000 you can see with with Yahweh and Yeshua, and they begin to sing this song. And so this song is the song that were taught to them by Moshe. So this is another marvelous wonder that as we look at this and put it all in perspective, death of the firstborn. And so coming out of Mizraim, it was the sign of the firstborn son. And the firstborn son was taken. And so from that day to this day, Yahweh says, and I ransomed you by not taking your firstborn. So therefore, you yourselves owe me. And so Yeshua, Messiah, he also was a firstborn from Miriam. And of course, we know that he wasn't born of the flesh, but of the word and the promise. So we're going to continue. Great and marvelous are your works. And so Yahweh El Shaddai, righteous and true are your ways. King of the set apart one. So right there, we shall see him. We shall look upon his face. And so let's continue. So let's begin to identify Yahweh's army, or armies, plural. We have noises out of heaven, sounds. We have also mankind. We have thunders, lightnings. We have darkness. We have wind, rain, hail, and fire. Tornadoes, hurricanes, the animal kingdom, pestilence, the insects, disease, famine, great earthquakes. And so again, the great mystery of Babylon will be identified. And how so? Well, Babylon will receive a major earthquake, and it will be the greatest earthquake in all time, according to the scriptures. And so these are Yahweh's armies. He uses multiple armies. And so he is very strategic as to which one he sends. And so what are we dealing with now? We're dealing with famine. We're dealing with hurricanes, strong winds, so many different parts of his army. And here's where we fail to see the signs of Yahweh, just thinking that these are natural phenomenons. These are Yahweh's judgment. So is Yahweh trying to kill everyone? He's not trying to kill everyone. Yahweh is a marksman. He's preserving some, but also he's teaching all the world that I am in control. So let's go back to my example of flying. Yahweh created all things back in the garden. He created the capacity for man to fly, but it did not manifest until they discovered that if you work in harmony with the law of gravity, the law of gravity, then you can achieve your goal. And so the law of gravity, whatever goes up comes down, right? You jump out of the airplane without a parachute, what's going to happen? You're going to go down still to this day. And so the law of gravity is there. And so man learned to build aircrafts that were complete, in complete harmony with the air and able to fly. Now, did Yahweh create flight or did man? Well, let's look and see again. Birds can fly. Let's say when man saw the birds flying, that became an idea. Hey, am I supposed to fly? Can I fly? And so man has been trying to fly ever since they saw the birds flying. You have also the fish of the sea. So did man get the understanding that maybe we can build vessels that can float on the water and we can do like the fish? And so let's just say that flight was not the first, man was not the first to think of flying. And so we can say that goes back to creation, and not until just over 100 years ago, man have not been able to fly in an airplane. But before that, they were able to go up in hot air balloons. So, all right, so let's continue. And so I want you to keep up with the armies. Okay, so anytime you see one of these pick up and a nation or a township or a city or an individual receive this judgment, you know Yahweh is in the mix. So let's continue. Let's go back to January 2019, looking at Switzerland and LA, United States. To my right, what you have is Switzerland, where this is very hard weather, snow. It snowed so hard, look at the window where the snow itself came in to the home. And that's not natural. That's not what should be. Our homes are to protect us from the outside elements, as we call them. Well, let's look at California back in 1989. Look at the highway, and this one is a two-part highway. You have the upper deck and the lower deck. So much traffic that they have two decks here. And you have a pancake situation where the upper deck fell down on top of the lower deck. So when you don't see these things, you don't realize that the elements were so strong that Yahweh's army marched or affected man-made objects or man-made pillars or man-made structures. And so there is no structure that man can make that can outdo Yahweh. So even going back to the plane, once again, I wanted to make sure I get that all out. The airplane, yes, man-made, but the creation of flight, Yahweh is in control and Yahweh made. Because if before man was created, he made the animal kingdom on the sixth day as well. And so they actually the birds were the fifth day, because he made the fish of the sea and birds of the sky. And so, since day 5, man was here. Excuse me. Since day 5, the birds were here, and flight was had by their creation. They were born and created to fly. So let's just keep it in perspective. All right. Shalom, shalom. I got a couple of folks coming. Desiree Reeves, and Deborah Hoskins, prophetess. Thank you for coming on. So as we look at the signs and wonders, we have to know that Yahweh is in charge. So let's once again let's throw COVID-19 in there. COVID-19. When did they label that? They labeled COVID-19 December 31st, 2019. They could have went on and gave it a different date. So why are these dates? So it is documented, because remember, Yahweh is going to remind us of what he told us. Then he's going to remind us that he brought it to pass. And then we will be his witnesses, because, see, we are a transitional generation. Not to go all into how we are the transitional generation, but understand, with the claim of Jerusalem for 70 years plus now, this generation, Yahweh says, Yeshua says, shall not pass until all be done. And so I'm just showing you how the timeline is operating, so that we can put certain tags out there and understand that Yahweh is working, and as he works, those who choose to believe and follow his word, you can say, okay, it's time for us to get ready. So let's continue looking at the signs of the time. And again, we're looking at Yahweh's armies. And if you can see, here's another witness going back to 2019. A man walks as hell covers the street in Guadalajara and Jalisco, Mexico. This is back June 30th, 2019. So just over a year from this point. And so that looks like snow, but it's not snow. Look at the semi trucks, the 18-wheelers. Look at the cars. Look at the homes. Look at the streets, how everything is covered. Look to my bottom right, and you see this car. Now, should this be happening during this time? No, not in Mexico. Now, a little lower on into South America, yes, but Mexico their weather should mirror ours. And so right now is a perfect time to show this, because right now it's hot. It's summer here. And if you go down into Mexico, it is also still summer. They are above the equator. But if you go a little further, once you cross into further into South America, you will then come into the winter time. So this should not be happening in June 30th of last year. So What are you saying, Rabbi? We need to keep our eyes open and begin to really know that Yahweh's army is marching. Well, why is Yahweh's army marching? They're on their way to gather Israel. And so he sends in his army strategically, first of all, to let Israel know, get ready. So let's look at Joel chapter 2, verse 11. And Yahweh shall give forth his voice before his army, for his camp is very great, for mighty is the doer of his word. For the day of Yahweh is great and very awesome, and who does bear it? Now, remember in Shalom, Kenya. Shalom, great to have you on. Praise Yah. It is the time of Yahweh's voice. And it says his voice goes before his army. So strategically, what is he doing? He's leading an army to go and gather his elect, his people, his kingdom from the four corners of the earth. And so as we see his army march, many people may not recognize Yahweh's army. So this is why we have to recognize his army. And so let me go back and name his army. Let's look at his army really quick. And again, I want you to keep up with when you see his army. Noises, sounds, mankind. Well, what about mankind? Conflict in the earth, war, rumors of war, thunders, lightnings, darkness, wind, rain, hail, fire, tornadoes, hurricanes, the animal kingdom, the insect kingdom, pestilence, disease, famine, and the last and the final one will be with a great earthquake. And so I can tell you exactly when it will be over, and Israel will go home. When the great seventh sound happens and the greatest earthquake takes place, according to Revelation, that will be the end of that period of time. And then we go into the millennial reign. How long is the millennial reign? 1,000 years. From that point, Hasatan will be incarcerated. So let's once again read Joel so we can apply this to his army. And Yahweh shall give forth his voice before his army. Now remember, we just named it. For his camp is very great. For mighty is the doer of his word. What about that right there? Mighty is the doer of his word. Blessed are they who are found doing Yahweh's will. Not getting ready, not trying to figure out what to do, just as the foolish bride. And remember, the title is Watch Yahweh's army. And so when Yeshua spoke to the foolish bride, he said, watch, for you know not the day nor the hour that the Son of Adam shall appear. And so that is a strong clue for Israel, because then you hear watch. When do we watch? Every year we watch for one particular new moon, and that is the 7th month, new moon, first day. It is a watch night once again, because it is a sign to Israel that the fall feast can now begin. And so again, without going into all of the feast days, I'm gonna keep on going because I have a little bit further I need to get to. So I don't want to run out of time. So blessed is, for mighty is the doer of his word. What should you be doing? His Sabbath. Pray that your flight does not take place on the Sabbath nor the winter. So let's explain that. The Sabbath comes every week, every 7 days, correct? Leviticus chapter 23. If you're not familiar with it, read it. It gives you all of the holy days and when to celebrate them. Exodus chapter 12, 13, 14, and 15. It gives you a little more details as they were coming out of Mizraim, but it also tells you to do this in remembrance now, because you saw me take their firstborn, right? All right, so, and during that time, Yahweh showed forth his army, and he took the firstborn of Mizraim. All right, so let's go ahead and move on a little further. Joel chapter 2, verse 25. Then I shall repay you the years that the swarming locust has eaten, and the crawling locust, and the consuming locust, and the gnawing locust, my great army which I sent among you. So here is, just in case you didn't understand when I said or called out the names of his army. What is a locust? Insect, pestilence, right? And so can you think of any time we have seen locusts? Sure you can. Just this year and over the previous years, we've been getting hit with locusts. We got hit in Texas, Israel, Egypt, parts of Africa, which is Madagascar, and I did say Egypt, other places as well in the U.S. And so what is this but Yahweh's army? So what are these signs supposed to do? What are they to achieve? That Yahweh's army, by his voice, are marching. And as his army goes out, the sign is to Israel that says, get ready, get ready. Because the time is drawing near. All right, so, but look at that first sentence, or the first line. Then I shall repay you the years that the swarming locust has eaten. And so, in other words, Yahweh is saying to Israel, I'm going to restore you, and restore you to what you think has been taken. And so why did Yahweh choose to name all of these different types of locusts? Now, is that just different types of locusts? I mean, because one type of locust can fulfill all of this: crawling, consuming, gnawing. But what he's saying here is that for Israel, you have been destroyed because of the lack of knowledge, and because you have rejected knowledge. It says, I also reject you from being priests to me. And so Israel have been scattered to the four corners. And so now that Israel is awakening to who we are as a people, we are returning to his Torah. And he's still saying, you have rejected my commands, my Torah. And so now this is what we can identify with the foolish bride, because the 10 brides, as Matthew's chapter 25 speaks concerning, he divided into two parts, foolish and wise. Who gets to go in? Everyone who's willing to do the will of Yahweh or his desire. And so this is what he's saying now. You're going to be restored, but not all of Israel will be restored at the same time. Although all of Israel will be restored. Remember, the scripture says that salvation is of the Yehudim. Let me give it to you in modern vernacular. Salvation is of Yehuda or Judah. And why is salvation of Judah? Because he have been entrusted with the word and the covenant. What word? What covenant? From Mount Sinai. And so as all Israel were there, it wasn't until much later when they were in the promised land that the land spewed them out just as Moshe said. Why? Because they didn't keep up with the 10 commandments, the laws, which are more than 10. They began to walk in idolatry. We can see with even King David, he committed adultery, but Yahweh restored David. So this is what he wants to do with all of Israel. And I don't have time to really go into a whole lot of David, but understand that the scripture says that David was perfect. Why? Because David, he did sin. He broke the covenant. He broke the law of Yahweh, but he also repented and he returned to Yahweh's ways. And so he acknowledged that he sinned. Remember when he took Bathsheba and orchestrated a plan to get rid of her husband because she was pregnant, and because she took Bathsheba while her husband was away fighting war. He took her, she became pregnant, and he wanted Uriah. He wanted Uriah to sleep with his wife so it would seem and appear that it was his child. But Yahweh, what is done in the dark, came to the light. And so when Jason, the prophet, brought to him his attention what he did, he spoke a word against it himself, not knowing, saying, that man is you. And so in that 2 Samuel chapter 12, read up on it, chapter 12 and 13, you can see where David's life took a turn for the worse from that period of time. But this is Yahweh's army. And so let's continue to move through. Let's look at Hosea chapter 6, verse 1 through 3. Let's look at how the latter rain will look. So we've talked about the army, Yahweh's armies coming to gather Israel. Not only gather Israel, but to alert us to ready ourselves, because he's getting ready to come. And he gives us a timeline. Yes, I know no man knows the day nor the hour, but if you understand his language, when he says certain things, it is so true. But remember, if he says this at one point and says something that sounds contrary the next time, then what you have to do is consider the time elements, which is why I'm very big on timelines. I need to understand what was said and when it was said, so that I can put everything in perspective. So when you don't know no man knows the day nor the hour, is also quoting something from the Tanakh or the Old Testament, because until Yeshua came to put a finger on it to tell us of his time, which was at Passover, that he was born and he would be raised up. So he gave us that timeline according to what? Leviticus chapter 23. So therefore, you don't know until I give you this information. And when was this information given? Sure, you're right. At Mount Sinai, the covenant. And so at the covenant of Mount Sinai, when he said, and you shall do these things, and Israel said, Moshe, you hear him, and whatever he says, we shall do. For those of us who are standing here today, and those of us who are not. Guess who wasn't there? You're right. We were not there. And so they spoke on our behalf. And so as we return back to his covenant, his holy days, his feast days, the Sabbath, which is the seventh day, then we are in line with his appointed times. And so do we need to worry about when he is coming? Not really. What we worry about is doing his desire, his will, and his will be done in the earth as it is in heaven. All right, so let's look at Hosea chapter 6, verse 1 through 3. Come and let us turn back to Yahweh. So that's what we need to be saying today. For he has torn, but he does heal. So right here, the crawling locust, the consuming locust, the devouring locust, right? He has stricken, but he binds us up. After 2 days, he shall revive us. On the third day, he shall raise us up so that we live before him. There's the restored kingdom, the latter rain. So let us know, let us purpose to know Yahweh. So how do you know Yahweh? I had a pastor who used to say some years ago, how well do you know God? As much as you know his word. How much do you trust God? As much as you trust his word. And so that was a call and response. And so I find that true even still to this day. A call and response from church. And I say, as I'm saying this, I find it still true even to this day that if we study his word, we will see there's patterns. And so you can go all the way back to Noah up to the time of Yeshua's death, and you can discover the pattern around Passover through Sukkot. You can see the pattern of world events, where the world was flooded, where they were delivered from the rain, where Yeshua died, where he rose from the grave. And if you continue to study it, you can see that there is a plan for his return based on Leviticus chapter 23. Let us know, let us pursue to know Yahweh. His going forth is as certain as the morning. And he comes to us like the rain, like the latter rain, watering the earth. And remember that in Matthew chapter 24, Yeshua said it would be as the days of Noah. And so when you say the latter rain, I use rain as in kingdom. And I know in the scripture, it used rain as watering the earth. And so remember, this is before Yeshua had come, but it speaks of his return When? After 2 days, he shall revive us. After what 2 days? Yeshua would be born, and he would also be crucified and raised from the earth. And he says right here, this is the prophet Hosea, that is showing us that he would also return after 2 days. And then on the third day, he shall raise up who? Israel, so that we, that's plural there, and that's talking about the kingdom of Israel, live before him. So how long is a day? A day is as 1,000 years, 1,000 years as 1 day in the timeline of Yahweh. But he's trying to get us to understand certain things that he has said to all people, but only some will understand. And so this is what we're saying now. How long has it been since Yeshua have come? Right at 2,000 years, right? And so day one, 1001 takes you into the second day. 2001 takes you into the third day. In other words, once you complete a day, you're now working on the next day. And so, as you can see, on the third day, he shall raise us up. And so that's his word, and he's good for it. So let's continue. Let's look at some more Yahweh's army. Here's the San Andreas Fault on my right, and then we're looking at California on my left. And so, and this goes back to 2019, July of 2019. There was a major earthquake. California has been going through. So I did not update this particular one since that time, but as you can see, 7.1 magnitude in one spot, and very close to it, 6.4. And the reason I'm bringing that up is the first one was July 4th, 6.4. And what is July 4th? It's a holiday in the United States that celebrate Independence Day, right, from Great Britain. But look at the aftershock. July 6th, 2 days later, was 7.1. Usually, your aftershock would be less than the initial shock. And so this is California. And so let's look at the illustration on my right, and let's look at some of those places. We have Washington, Oregon, we have California. So here it is over here. So this is just a closer viewpoint. We have the Pacific Ocean. And what is happening here, we're looking at the fault lines. These fault lines are being shaken. And so what science is saying now is that California is going to be separated off from mainland USA. This picture goes back to 2012. The current one that we're looking at. But the one on my left, this is 2019. And so what we see is a lot of movement in the nations. Shalom, Coach Annette. Great to have you on. What we see is a lot of movement in the nations. Right now, what's covering the news is we have the political presidential run, as well as what's even bigger than that, what's taking center stage is COVID-19. And so I mentioned before about COVID-19 being dated December 31st, 2019. And so what we have is a timeline so that it is time stamped for future references, so that you will remember, we will remember things, as we are a transitional generation, seeing a lot of things take place. And so what is time stamped, and I'll give you a tiny bit more of that, is the 70th year of Israel, the land, being reclaimed in the name of Israel. But we also have the 400th year, and both of these have touched in 2019, timestamp. So we are still in the 400th year, because remember, it lasts for 1 year as recognition, and so the acknowledgement still goes on until actually this month, and really next month for the 400th year. And so we are in the time frame, and Yahweh's army is marching. Isaiah 29, verses 6 through 8. You shall be visited by Yahweh of hosts with thunder. Here's his army. And earthquakes and great noise and whirlwind and storm and flames of devouring fire. Then the crowd of all the nations who fought against Ariel, even all who fought against her and her stronghold and distressed her, shall be as a dream of a night vision. And it shall be as when a hungry man dreams, and see, he eats, but he awakes and his being is empty. Or as when a thirsty man dreams, and see, he drinks, but he awakes and see, he is faint, and his being is longing. Thus shall the crowd of all the nations be who fought against Mount Zion. Oh, let's look at this. Shalom, Dr. Yo. Good to have you on. Coach Annette. So, Yahweh's army. Again, remember, we're looking at Yahweh's army. So here it is right here. He says, and you shall be visited by what? Yahweh of hosts with thunder, earthquakes, noise, whirlwind, storms, flames of devouring fire. So here we can see again the scripture that defines Yahweh's armies. And so this is what I wanted to bring out to help you to understand where we are in time. Yahweh's army is marching. But look how he speaks in what it's going to seem like. It's going to seem like a man who's hungry. In his dream, his physical body is hungry. But he wakes up. But in his dream, he eats. But when he wakes up, his physical body have not eaten. And so therefore, he's empty. He's hungry. Or he's thirsty. In his dream, he drinks. And then he awakens to find that he's still thirsty. And so this is how the nations will find themselves in a very strong predicament, that you're going to know who's in charge. In other words, so remember, going back to the conspiracy, who's doing this? Is it man, COVID-19? Is it man, all of these different viruses that we are having? Is it man, or is it just a conspiracy, or is it Yahweh? And like I said, Yahweh created the ability to fly in the garden. Let me give you one more example. Yahweh also created the ability for sound waves to travel. This is how I'm speaking to you right now. Whatever city you're in, you're listening to my voice. You're watching me. This technology was created back in the garden. Sound waves, radio, television. But who had television during that time? Who needed television when it was just Adam and Eve? They could speak to each other, right? But when we began to multiply in the earth, people found a need to be able to talk to people, to communicate to people who are further away. And so the creation of sound waves, bite, videos, pictures, all of these things, technology just kept growing. You know, we started out with photographs back in, I think, the 1800s. And since that time, we've been increasing in technology and being able to expand on what we created or what man has created. And so you have Alexander Graham Bell with the telephone, and you have Benjamin Franklin before that period of time, and the experiment with the key and figuring out that we can tap into electricity. And so all of these things working together for Yahweh's people, right? And so with all of this technology now, man have been able to discover certain things. But remember, when did Yahweh quit work? On the sixth day. So there is nothing that man can make, whether has been made or to be made in the future, that was not already created back during the time of creation. So in looking at Shalom Kala, looking at creation, everything was done then. So there's nothing that man can come up with and say they created it, because you have to use Yahweh resources. Whether you're using metals, Yahweh's creation, air, Yahweh's creation, dirt, Yahweh's creation. There is nothing that man can make now or even in the future that will not include Yahweh's creation. So who's in charge? Yahweh's in charge. And so just know his army has been mobilized, as we can see in Isaiah. And so we're going to continue to move on, because I want to finish this up. And so let's look at some more of Yahweh's army. This goes back to 2019. Again, I took these images from the internet. And so I thought this was very interesting. This is Kuwait. The temperature is 62 degrees Celsius, which is equivalent to Fahrenheit 143.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes, that's hot. That is hot. And so you can see this is three different images. The tree, just spontaneous combustion. It is so hot here at this particular place. And I think this, if I remember correct, that this was the airport. But looking at my middle image, you can see it a little better. And I wanted to get a couple other images so that you can understand that's not the sun behind this particular tree. And this right here is on the streets of Kuwait. And so this tree just instantly burst into flames at 143 degrees Fahrenheit. You can see why. And so here's another good image for us to see that now we know that this is on the street. We have this pickup truck here, white pickup truck, and on either side of it, you see a fire tornado, or it's a tornado, but it's on fire. So what was this sign? A reminder of Egypt. Remember when Yahweh stood between Israel and their enemy, Egypt, as a pillar of fire. They could not move, right? And so in the Reed Sea, or the Sea of Reeds, Yahweh stood between them, that Israel were able to go to sleep. And let no one fool you. Hollywood will have you think that they ran across and over there in, a matter of minutes. This was a long way out, long way. So they got so tired at night, they fell asleep. Now, how do you fall asleep with your enemy chasing you? Well, guess what? Yahweh put a pillar of fire in between them, and he let it be known to Israel, because they saw the sign and wonder that he was in front of them and in behind them. So he stopped them in the sea. Why was this? Because I used my bait to get my fish that I wanted to trap. So they went to sleep, and they can see them on the other side. And so they were so hungry to get them, they also went to sleep. But when they woke up, what happened? The wheels of their chariots were taken off. And they said, let us get out of here, for Yahweh fights against us and for them. And so as they began to try to retreat and run back to the other side, they couldn't. And they drowned in the Sea of Reeds. So let's continue to move. Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 16 through 19. Thus saith Yahweh concerning the sovereign who sits on the throne of David. So whatever this is concerning now the king of the bloodline of David, concerning all the peoples who dwell in this city, and concerning your brothers who have not gone out with you into exile. Thus says Yahweh of hosts, see, I am sending on them the sword, the scarcity of food, and the pestilence. And I shall make them like spoiled figs. So spoiled figs as to be uneaten. And I shall pursue them with the sword, with the scarcity of food, and with pestilence, and I shall make them a horror among all the reigns of the earth. Wow. A horror among, how will it be a horror among all the nations? Among all the nations where they are scattered. And so they're beneath, they're on the bottom. So let's continue. A horror among all the reigns of the earth, to be a curse, an astonishment, and a hissing, and a reproach among all the nations where I have scattered them. For they did not heed my words, declares Yahweh, which I sent to them by my servants the prophets, raising up early and sending them, yet you did not listen, declares Yahweh. And so, in other words, right here, Yahweh is showing right here concerning Israel and the kingdom of Israel, the king, you are not obeying my covenant. And so this was a time where you can see where they begin to disobey Yahweh and the covenant that they made of obedience. And so in the covenant of obedience, Yahweh says, now I'm sending my sword, his army, scarcity of food, his army, famine, pestilence, his army. And so this is where I identify, as I've been going through these slides or these scriptures, you can see now that I am proving to you Yahweh's army. And so if you see his army at work now, understand it's only a matter of time. How much time? He says 2 days, and the third day I shall stand you up. You shall live before me. Jeremiah chapter 51, verses 1 through 6. The utter destruction of Babylon. And so now let's look at the timeline, because where is Israel? Israel is in Babylon once again. Israel is in mystery Babylon. So let's read and understand how so. Thus saith Yahweh, see, I am stirring up the spirit of a destroyer against Babylon, against those who dwell in Leb, my opponents. And I shall send winnowing to Babylon, or Babel, who shall winnow her and empty her land, for they shall be against her all around in the day of evil. And the slain shall fall in the land of Kasdim, and the pierced through in her streets. For neither Israel nor Yehudah is widowed by his Elohim, Yahweh of hosts, though their land has been filled with sin against the set apart one of Israel. Flee from the midst of Babel, and let each one save his life. Do not be cut off in her crookedness, for this is the time of the vengeance of Yahweh, the recompense he is repaying her. And so, in other words, we're now talking about the destruction of Babel, the destroyer. And so, stirring up a destroyer against Babel. And so let's put this in perspective. Babylon of Nebuchadnezzar has already fallen and never risen again. But Revelation chapter 14 talks about, and 18, 15, 14, 15, and 18 calls the name of Mystery Babylon. So if Yeshua is returning and Israel is in Mystery Babylon, because 14 says Babylon is falling, is falling, is falling. And so that means it's in a process of falling, falling, falling. It's not a past tense, has fallen. That's not the past tense when you read that. It's prophecy. It is something that is happening, and it's happening, and it's happening. And so right there at the beginning of Revelation 14, you can see where it's speaking of the 144,000 that are being gathered. And Revelation chapter 7, where they are before Elohim. And there's also a number that no man can number. So there's the 144,000 who will be the heads of their fathers' houses. They will be named just like they were named coming out of Mizraim at 430-year period. And so now my second bullet says this: for neither Israel nor Yehudah, so that's the whole kingdom, not 100%, But the 144,000, let me give you an easy way of looking at the kingdom. The whole kingdom can be represented by 12 people, one from each tribe. Yet, that's not what he's called. So you can see right away that 144,000 is vastly larger than 12. And what I mean is one man per tribe. But what is being fulfilled in Revelation chapter 7 verses, well, just read through the whole chapter. And Revelation chapter 14, Revelation chapter 12, the bride who's being flown to her place of safety. Just understand that if you had one from per tribe, that you will get all 12 tribes representation, and Yahweh is able to grow them into the stars of the sky, fish of the sea, sand of the sea. But he said 144,000. But then as you read in Revelation chapter 7, verse 10, 11, 12, in that neighborhood there, you would also see that it's a number connected to them, of which no man can number. So that number right there has no number. It just has no number. And so they will be saved. And so what he says here about, let's see, free from the midst of Babel, come out of her, my people, Revelation. Let each one save his life. Well, I thought Yeshua is going to save us. Yes, he is, but he's also given you an opportunity where he says, come out of her, my people, right? So Revelation calls us to come out. So here's the difference between coming out of Egypt and coming out of the nations. Coming out of Egypt, he brought them all out by an outstretched and mighty arm. Coming out of the nations, he says, you come out of her, my people. And so now it's up to you to choose to be wise and not foolish. So how is the difference between the wise and the foolish? The wise says, you know what? I will keep his Sabbath. I will not do traditions of man over his commands. I will keep his holy days. I will eat according to his correct laws, according to correct eating. And so that is wise. But those who say we are no longer under the wise, that is foolish. We don't need to do that. Many will say, I'm not Jewish. I'm not held to those laws. That's a foolish thought. All right, so let's continue. And I'm actually getting close. I have a couple of slides left, I believe, here. And I'm going to be closing this out. So let's look at this Babylon is falling again. Chapter 18, verse 1 through 4. And after this, I saw another messenger coming down from the heaven, having great authority, and the earth was lightened from his esteem. So who is that? That has to be Yeshua, because the earth is lightened, right? And he cried out with a mighty voice, saying, Babel, the great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons. Well, right there, that tells you it's not all destroyed. It's falling. It's in a process of falling because it has what? Become a dwelling place, a living place of demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, and a haunt for every unclean and hated bird. Because all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her whoring, and the sovereigns of the earth have committed whoring with her. And the merchants of the earth have become rich through the power of her riotous living. And I heard another voice from the heavens saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues." And so there's again Yahweh's armies, the plagues. And so Yahweh is telling us that I'm going to bring Babylon down. And when I bring Babylon down, you don't want to be caught up in Babylon. So come out of her, my people. So does that mean we have to flee United States? That's not what he's saying. What he is saying, come out of the idolatrous ways, for it has become a place of idolatry, a hunt from. Remember, send me you're tired, you're hungry, you're poor, right? It has become a hunt for every unclean spirit, a hunt for every unclean and hated bird. And so, what is the sign of the United States? The eagle, right? The eagle is an unclean bird. And so, we're going to go to the last slide. Revelation 19, verse 6 through 9. We're going to look at the gathering of Israel. So what I've walked you through is his army going out to the nations of the earth. Then we looked at what is Yahweh's, what are his armies, what does it look like? And so we looked at the different viewpoints of Yahweh's armies, the plagues. We can summarize it there. You can see in extreme weather. You can see it in famine. You can see Yahweh's army in earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, pestilence, hail, which is extreme weather. All of these things make up Yahweh's army, and he says, and he shall give forth his voice and lead his army out. And so I say to you today that his army is ready, and it is already marching. Let us prepare ourselves to receive the Lamb. And so as we look at the supper of the Lamb, let's look at verses 6 through 9. And I heard as the voice of the great crowd, as the sound of many waters, and as the sound of mighty thunder, saying, Hallelujah, for Yahweh El Shaddai reigns, and to her it was given to be dressed in fine linen, clean and bright, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the set apart ones. And he said to me, Write, blessed are those who have been called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, and this is John speaking, these are the true words of Elohim. And so here is the look at the supper, the marriage supper of the Lamb. And when does that take place? Once a year. And it is called Sukkot. It is in the 7th month and the 15th day of the Hebrew calendar. And so it becomes a Sabbath no matter what day it comes in. Remember earlier I said, and this is out of Matthew's, pray that your flight don't take place on the Sabbath nor the winter, right? And so with that said, why the Sabbath? Because traditionally this country does not honor the Sabbath. They go to church or they worship on Sunday, which is the first day of the week. And so the biggest argument you want to get into is what day is the Sabbath. And so many people will argue the tradition of their ancestors or the tradition of their relatives, because really, not so long ago, they were still keeping the Sabbath, like really in the 1700s. By the time they got to the 1800s, you can see the change that took place by the Catholic Church that changed the Sabbath. And so now most churches operate on a first day, rather a seventh day. So what about winter? Again, the winter. There are no winter holy days that are celebrated as a mainstream according to Leviticus chapter 23. You have, other things like Purim and let's see, the different fasts, the fast of the 10th month, different, different times, but they're not part of the main seven, which are named in Leviticus chapter 23. And so there's a reason Yahweh put his focus on just that seven, so that we can have our understanding not clouded by too many other pieces. And so there are no winter feast days or holy days set apart that we must celebrate according to Leviticus chapter 23. Again, you can go to Purim, and that would be, right at the end of winter, going into the spring. Also, the 10th month fast. But these are not commanded at this time, so that we can focus on what Yahweh wants us to see. What do we want us to see? That no man knows the day nor the hour, because when the Feast of Trumpets take place, it is because we have watched for the new moon and we blow the shofar. And as we blow the shofar, it alerts the other camps or the other Hebrews that it is time now for the fall feast. And remember, Revelation talks about well, actually, this is First Thessalonians also, where the Messiah himself shall descend from heaven with the voice of the master messenger, the archangel, and those who are dead in Messiah shall be raised up to meet him. And those who are alive at that time shall be gathered together to meet them in the clouds. This is not rapture. This is very practical. If you've ever been in the mountains during the change of the seasons, you will see how the mountains, the clouds settle down on the mountains. And that's during the fall feast. We see it every year. And so that becomes very apparent to us that image, that sight, when you see it, it really brings home what he's speaking when it says, and they shall be caught up to meet them. So this is pretty much it, where I'm going to begin to close this out. And just simply, if there's any questions, please go ahead and post it, whereas I can respond to your questions as you put them out there. If you have any questions, if not, we're going to get ready to close out and just call it a night. I have enjoyed being with you this evening and to show you Yahweh's army. This for me is always a great joy to look at this. This is a subject that I don't think we have delved into enough. And we need to really understand Yahweh. His words are true, and know that his deliverance is taking place. This is not something that we're waiting for. This is something that is happening. And so I can give you this picture right here, that he's given us such a detailed picture. He gave us a certain period to look out, a 7-year period of time to look out for. And so where are we in this time period? And so again, that's also a heavy topic. We won't go into that. We're going to close out. But just understand the things that we have been seeing over the past few years are part of Yahweh's army. Remember, he talks about woe, woe, woe. Unto the inhabitants of the earth. That's from Revelation. For Hasatan has been thrown down to you, and he is coming with great wrath. From that period of time, once he is thrown down, he has 3.5-year period to do his best, and actually a little bit longer. It talks about 1260 then 1290. Right there is where Revelation 14 talks about, Revelation 12 talks about Michael standing up and defending Israel, who is given 2 wings to be flown to her place in the wilderness. And from that point, Hasatan will no longer go back to heaven. He will be thrown into the abyss. He will be incarcerated for 1,000 years following that period of time. So as we begin to close this out, I want to just say thank you. I don't see any questions. So again, I am Rabbi James Byers, coming to you from Melo HaGoyim in Winston-Salem. Please don't forget to visit our website, which is melohagoyim.org, melohagoyim.org. Go out there and visit us if you have any other questions. Also, if you'd like to make a donation, you can reach us right there. Shalom to one and all. And again, thank you for visiting with us. And join us again on next week when we will have Ravis on the line. Shalom until next week.